heute zu the opening event. The fact that we have met today on the occasion of the fourth such conference with the Compact with Africa countries is obvious. The President of Congo, Mr. Tshisekedi, is here as the representative of the African Union, and Cyril Ramaphosa, who happens to be a member of the G20 and is responsible for Compact with Africa together with the IMF and the World Bank. I'm delighted about the fact that we had the opportunity to meet today, though because of social distancing rules, this was a hybrid event. At the time we established the Compact with Africa, we could not foresee what the world would experience as a consequence of the pandemic. The Compact with Africa was on the one hand about reforms in the member countries, as there are Egypt, Ethiopia, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Guinea, Rwanda, Senegal, Togo and Tunisia and Morocco. So, as I said, it's about reforms in the country, attracting private investment, and also a bit about improving investment conditions as a consequence of enhanced reforms. But the actual need to carry out such reforms so as to allow investments, for example, in the health sector of the African continent. The urgency that the pandemic brought to this was something we could not foresee. In our second session today, we had the honor of having Professor Schein as our guest here. And Kristalina Georgieva said the vaccines are the key for a recovery of the African continent, because Africa was especially hard hit as a consequence of the pandemic, and growth is of essential importance if you are to achieve progress for the people on the African continent. The availability of vaccines is important, but also the production of vaccines. All of that is important for economic welfare and well-being on the African continent. We have been able to vaccinate up to 60% of our population, whereas in Africa it's only 2%, so it's a dramatic inequality and injustice that we need to overcome quickly. And we talked about this in quite an honest manner today. And I am confident that there will be ways and means to tackle this issue, to allow production of vaccines on the African continent, transfer step by step of the technology, whilst at the same time, of course, supplying African people with the vaccines they need. Today, we have brought together the representatives of the European Commission, the World Bank, the IMF. Mario Draghi joined us by video link, who Italy is the chair of the G20 this year, and we had representatives of the African countries join us today, especially when we look to Rwanda, Senegal and South Africa before. It is fair to say that there are first very concrete projects about production of vaccines. COVAX will enhance its delivery. Germany will make available not only 30 million doses of vaccines, but it will be as much as 70 million doses. We have made a financial contribution to COVAX, but what we have to ensure now is speedy delivery of the vaccines to the people in Africa, and that was one of the priority issues we discussed today. That is what I have to say, and I'd now like to hand the floor to President Tshisekedi. You have the floor.
Madame la Chancelière.
Thank you, Madam Chancellor. Today we also talked about the need to enhance special drawing rights that are being made available to African economies, the 33 billion that were negotiated and discussed in Paris. We want to undertake a special joint effort to ensure that those 33 billion are being increased to 100 billion. We also discussed today the situation in Africa. We analyzed the situation with regard to the vaccination of people on the African continent, and we spoke of the need for technology transfer and the right to intellectual property and possible waivers so as to allow vaccines being produced on the African continent. On the other hand, we also need to convince the Africans, because we have a number of theories that increase the fear on the part of people, which stories are being told that feed into the distrust of the people with regard to being vaccinated. I also use the opportunity to discuss today what is happening in Congo with Manadolid and Covax-C, two anti-COVID medicines, two anti-COVID drugs that have proved to be effective. I don't have the exact figures of the percentage of their effectiveness, but I talked to a number of doctors and experts who have affirmed and confirmed the effectiveness of these drugs or medicines. All of that will make a contribution to the recovery of the global economy. I was happy to listen to Mr. Shahin. He said it would be possible to continue to cooperate and to work in the direction of allowing for transfer of technology. So it's not only about prevention, but also to focus on how one can heal or treat people who suffer from COVID, and to deepen and further expand research on such approaches. As I said, this medicine is undergoing a clinical study right now at an American university. I reported back to President Ramaphosa when we met in Africa, and I think that this is undoubtedly also a possible approach to tackling the COVID-19 problem. The more so as when we talk about vaccines, we very often speak about the necessity for a booster vaccination. So we are not yet in a position to say exactly how strongly immune we might be as a consequence of these vaccines being administered. So we're still learning, we're still at a learning stage. But everything might be possible, and Professor Shahin underlined that too. So we do have funds, we do have means and ways to also focus on possible medicines and drugs for healing people who suffer from COVID-19. And we talked about this today, and it has given us a sense of optimism and hope with regard to the development of the African continent. Allow me to use this opportunity to thank all our partners, be they bilateral or multilateral, for the contribution they've made, for the contributions that they have made to assist us in Africa. This increases our courage and hope for the future. Thank you, Madam Chancellor. Thank you very much for inviting us here today, and thank you very much for your interest in Africa.
Thank you, Chancellor Merkel, for this opportunity. When Chancellor Angela Merkel took this initiative as part of the G20 to have a compact with Africa, it was mainly aimed at promoting investments in a number of African countries, as well as to help with the reform process that those economies should embark upon. And when COVID descended on the entire world, the G20 Compact with Africa had to respond. And today we've had a wonderful meeting on this platform where we address contemporary issues, particularly the issue of how COVID-19 is having a negative impact, not only on the health of people in our continent, but also on our economies. And we discussed at a great length, also with the participation of the IMF, the World Bank, as well as the African Development Bank, on how finances can be made available to boost the African economies that have been devastated by the pandemic. And we focused attention on the SDRs and argued that the SDRs need to be increased. There are $650 billion that are being made available, and the more developed countries are going to take a large portion thereof. And we've argued that rather than Africa only have $33 billion, we need to have up to $100 billion. And we're still insisting on that and would like the more developed economies to pass on those SDRs that they are not going to use to African countries. And we think this is an eminently possible option that they can embark on. And it is also supported by the Managing Director of the IMF. We also spent time on this platform discussing the challenge of vaccination that the African continent is facing right now. We expressed our disappointment, we expressed our unhappiness, and said that it's not fair that Africa has only vaccinated 2% of the entire population of the 1.3 billion population, and yet your more developed countries in the north have vaccinated up to 60%. And we expressed a lot of unhappiness of this inequality that currently exists. And we said that there needs to be more equality, there needs to be fairness, and it is to this end that South Africa and India made a proposal to the World Trade Organization that there should immediately be a temporary suspension of the intellectual property rights so that vaccine production should be spread to other countries as well, because it's very dangerous and even reckless to have vaccines just being produced in just a few countries in the north and none being done on the African continent. And all of us in that meeting felt that Africa needs to be given the opportunity and the right to produce vaccines. It is a matter of life and death. It's also an economic imperative because vaccine policy has an impact on the growth of our economies. And so therefore we say production must then be also spread to African countries, and this should be done through this waiver that we are advocating for in the WTO. And we are pleased that discussions are taking place at the WTO, but also broadly in various parts of the world, in the European Union, in the United States as well, and so on. And we believe that progress can be made. And today we had this professor from BioNTech who's come with a very good proposition and supported by Chancellor Merkel that we can actually transfer knowledge, we can transfer technology, and we can spread out manufacturing bases in various hubs on the African continent. And we believe that a number of countries can gear up to their capability, and finance can be made available. The World Bank and the IMF would be willing to assist, as the African Development Bank as well. So this has been a very historic meeting because we address a contemporary issue of great importance that touches on the lives and economies of many African countries. And this has been made possible by the platform that Chancellor Merkel set up. And we would like, as the African continent, to thank her for the initiative that she took in 2017 when Germany was the president of the G20, coming up with this great initiative to focus on Africa. She's been a champion of the African continent. She supported the many initiatives that we are engaged in Africa, and Africa is going to miss her greatly because what she has contributed in just boosting Africa is great. There are many initiatives across a number of countries that have been supported as a result of this G20 Compact with Africa. So we thank her and we honor Chancellor Merkel, and we bid a wonderful farewell as a continent. All of us expressed our great thanks to her. So thank you very much.
Ja, danke schön.
Thank you very much indeed.
Pas de questions? Il n'y a pas de questions. Oh.